really trust us.
Marry my daughter.
Is she a prostitute?
The eyes of a dying giraffe can change a man.
We try make blood much big.
Happy birthday, monkey spanker. No, really trust us.
Hope you enjoyed the show.
Hello, and welcome to No Really Trust Us, the podcast where we troll through the endless stream of streaming titles and pull out the ones the real gems, the little hidden gems, where we say, no, really, trust us. It's really good. I'm Matt McNevin. I am an independent filmmaker and video producer, and with me are my two primeval big game hunters, Dedo and Ken. Dedo, introduce yourself to the people.
Hi guys, I'm Dedo. I am also a independent filmmaker and a video editor and an occasional novelist from time to time. And I think you should trust us.
And Ken.
Yes, we should trust us. Everyone should trust us. I'm Ken. I'm a video producer and a writer and a longtime big movie fan, and that's me.
Excellent. I think we all are. I guess that's why we're here. And Dedo, we have to remember to always flog those novels, man. Come on, we got to flog the novels.
Yes, they've been naughty. You should definitely. Sadly, only one novel currently. But I do hope to have book 2 finished in 2025. So it's really me that should be flogged.
Well, today we are discussing The Primevals, which is a film that I have a lot of affection for. Maybe not necessarily may not be shared by some people, but I still have a lot of affection for it. And it's a film that has a long and tortured history, which we will get into, and certainly colored my opinion of it. And so it's interesting to discuss this with Ken and Dedo, who did not know as much about the backstory. And so they were able to kind of go in cold and just look at it as a film. And I would, love to hear their opinions on it without that context for it, because I think the context of it really kind of, colored my opinion of it. So as we usually do, we'll start with just a basic synopsis so that we know what we're talking about. And just to reiterate, it's a film called The Primevals. And again, a part of that backstory, it was shot in 1994 and sat unfinished for almost 30 years. Well, actually, 30 years because it came out in 2024. And we'll get into all the details of the backstory. But that's kind of why it looks the way it does and feels the way it does, because what I liked about it, and what I think maybe some people may not like about it as you watch it, is that it really does feel like it's a film that's out of time in a lot of ways, in more than one ways, in terms of the types of story it tells is kind of classic in terms of, and the throwback. And then it's out of time in the sense that it's a film that was shot 30 years prior and then finally finished. So it's kind of an interesting case in terms of how it was made and how it's presented. So rather than we usually do the IMDb synopsis, but the IMDb synopsis in this case is kind of half-assed, so we're not going to do that one. We're going to the Wikipedia synopsis. We're going to change it up a little bit. So the synopsis of The Primevals is: after a Yeti is killed by a group of Sherpas, a team of university scientists travel to Nepal to find the origins of the creature. Teaming up with a rugged tracker, the group set out from the Sherpa village and, after a large avalanche, discover a hidden primeval land populated by prehistoric creatures, ancient hominids, and an alien reptilian species. So that is the synopsis of it. It was written and directed by David Allen, co-written by Randall William Cook, and produced by the famous Charles Band of Full Moon Entertainment. But before we get into all that, Dedo, what did you think of The Primevals, just as an initial sort of impression of it?
My initial impression is this movie was a nostalgia dump, and better for worse, like if you like stop motion, if you love Jason and the Argonauts, this movie is like
Ray Harryhausen,
stop motion, which is pretty cool. And I going in, I knew at least that the director had that background, and so I think it was cool that it was like, this isn't Jaws where you don't get to see the monster until 2/3. You see the monster, then you see other monsters, and you see more monsters, and they're all stop motion. And also, I did really like the look of the movie. It was like clearly shot on film. It's almost got like the Panavision like Cinecolor saturation and it's shot in a mix of location and studio, and but like the studio stuff is great. There's certainly no green screen. Everything is physically there and tangible and stuff like that. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it's crazy this movie came out in 2013 because it's a total throwback. And it's funny because, like, the trend now is to shit on CGI, and all the Disney movies are like, we're doing practical sets. There's no CGI. Dune was like, there's no CGI. It's like, yeah, they're like, that worm is real, guys. But in this case, like, yeah, there is no CGI. Like, it's stop motion
and
and
matte paintings and
matte paintings, yeah, and it's like it's a very different feel. There was one little moment where I was like, okay, clearly this movie was not meant to be seen in HD, because like when they first
right.
find the warming towers, and they're like, it's perfectly smooth. There's no rivets, and I'm like, there's rivets right there.
There's obvious big
There's
rivets.
Big rivets.
But that happens.
Yeah. But that is a good point, Dado, because it was that's an interesting point I hadn't thought of, because it was made for the, early to mid 90s VHS market. So, the softness and fuzziness of a VHS would hide some of that stuff. And in the kind of, and filmmakers have talked about this in that initial jump to HD, filmmakers talked about that, especially visual effects artists talked about that, about how they would count on, with the move to digital HD cameras, they would count on some of that, even film being higher quality, they would count on some of that film softness to hide a little bit of that stuff in model painting and things like that. And they would talk about how the sharpness and the too digital look of it really made it look glaring. It made it look like plaster instead of making it look like rock.
Yeah, I remember if you watch the 4K print of Ghostbusters, there's a shot of the gargoyle overlooking the city. It's just a little cutaway, but like the gargoyle is actually slightly transparent because it was an actual overlay that they literally physically laid in there. And you never would have seen that, but when you see it with that much resolution, you're like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
that's a ghost gargoyle.
Not a great composite. Yeah.
So yeah, Ken, tell us what you thought.
Yeah.
So I went in totally cold, not knowing the background of the movie at all. And so I really I think I appreciate it more now knowing what the background was and what the intentions were, because I think I felt confused watching it, thinking, why is this so retro for a movie that came out in 2024? And, knowing that a lot of that was intentional kind of makes me appreciate it more. Because certainly I'm a big Ray Harryhausen fan, and like Jason and the Argonauts and some of the others. And, I kind of appreciated that throwback retro look to the special effects, especially because, you just don't, even though it's kind of making a little resurgence now, it's not something you see done currently anymore. And, I really appreciate the work that goes into it and the creativity of it. And like Dedo was saying, it's nice not to have any CGI, and, all the special effects have a tactile feeling to them, which is great. And I'm also a sucker for, Lost Worlds, and we go, it's like the Savage Land in Marvel Comics, there's this hidden oasis in the middle of the Antarctic, which, is a common fantasy trope, but I always appreciate it. So yeah, so I think I'm somewhere in the middle of you guys, but I think there's something to appreciate about this.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about the kind of subgenre of movies directed and created by effects artists, and the some of the story limitations many times, where the primary motive is to show off the effects, or show off, do something, or pay homage to an effects artist that guy loved, and less so on the story. And I certainly think, as much as I like this movie, I think that certainly happens here. Maybe the most famous example of that, a good example, is James Cameron, who to the opposite extreme is basically a visual effects guy who knows how to tell a story, and like he's kind of like the yeah. Well, he does.
I think he could tell a good story. It's his
Yeah,
dialogue that's
yeah.
the problem to
He's
me.
kind of at the upper the upper end of that, of like knowing, being able to blend his love and his knowledge of visual effects into a story.
I will just say that I'm pretty sure James Cameron's copy of Save the Cat has been lost under the billions and billions of dollars that he made. But like, yeah,
That's
back in the day, that guy could write a story. True Lies,
yeah.
raped. I don't know if he gets sole writing credit on that or not. But
Yeah.
like, Titanic was barely passable, and I'm sorry, Avatar is garbage from a story point of view.
Yeah, it seems like
I would agree with that. I guess I'm always thinking of his older movies when I'm thinking.
Yeah, I
of his
guess that's what
storytelling.
I mean. I'm talking like Terminator 2, Aliens kind of era,
He stopped caring when he got the seventh or eighth zero in his bank account.
Well, it's interesting because I think maybe he's kind of now with Avatar, since he's so enamored of the effects on this movie, he's kind of gone around to a movie like Primevals, where he's so enamored of the effects, sort of like George Lucas was, to a certain extent, so enamored of the effects and getting that across that he again didn't focus as much on the story as probably should have.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but he might actually be right, because like one of the reasons Avatar did so well internationally was because the story was so simple.
Yeah.
You could. I don't speak Spanish. I could watch that movie in Spanish and know. In fact, that's what actually some people recommended you do. You're like, just watch this movie in a language you don't understand. It'll be so much better.
Yeah.
So like,
same with Titanic, really, right?
Yeah,
that was so initially popular.
Sadly, it's like, that might be the trend, the common denominator. I mean, it's clearly not. Obviously, like you watch Avengers in Spanish, you're gonna be like, "Ooh, I don't understand." Yeah, he might be onto something.
I mean, that's certainly why. I mean, $2 billion will do that for you, or $5 billion with both of them. But Ken mentioned the backstory. You guys mentioned the backstory, so let's get into that. Get that out of the way to set the context for it, because the backstory is quite interesting and quite extensive. So because I did a lot of research for this episode, so it starts with a guy named David Allen, who is the co-writer and director of Primevals. And he was an effects artist. He's a legendary effects artist in effects circles. He's not a household name like Stan Winston or Dennis Muren or Tom Savini or some of those guys from ILM and the big effects guys. But he was as talented as those guys, especially in terms of stop motion. And he had been dreaming of making this movie since the late 60s. And it kind of starts with a presentation film that he made in 1968 called Raiders of the Stone Ring is what it was called. And it was a kind of embryonic version of this story. It was quite different, but basically the elements were there. And he was trying to get it made, but as a feature, but just couldn't get the money together. That film was worked on with Dennis Muren, who of course went on to be a famous effects artist with Industrial Light and Magic, and won 9 Academy Awards for visual effects. So pretty much every major effects breakthrough from 1977 through about 2005 or 6, he was a part of. And also a guy named Jim Danforth, who was a matte painter and another great effects. So those three got together and said, hey, we're nerds. We're effects nerds. Let's get together and do this. Their collaboration did bear some fruit in a film called Equinox. Have you guys heard of a film called Equinox? Ken and Detto?
That sounds familiar. I'm going to need to cover.
It's sort of similar to Primevals, just on a much smaller scale. And it was made in 1960, also in 68, I think it was, 67, 68, when they made this promo film for this film. And it was only 61 minutes long. And it was Dennis Muren and David Allen and Jim Danforth working together. And basically just those three, because Dennis Muren talks about it as there was times when they had a 16 millimeter Bolex camera that could not go more than 30 seconds. They could only run 30 seconds of film through it. So none of the takes are longer than 30 seconds, and no sync sound. So they did all the sound post dubbing. All the dialogue is dubbed. And they put it together, and the effects are pretty good for stop motion animation in 1969, 70. And they only had $6,500. That's how much it cost to make the movie.
Wow.
Was $6,500. And for that, and again, it's another film that you kind of have to make allowances for. Like, it's not good, but there's some good stuff in it and some interesting stuff. And it's sort of the first kind of step forward of some legendary effects artists. So it's significant for that. So significant actually that it's in the Criterion Collection, and that's how I watched it. I have the Criterion Collection DVD, which I watched. And I watched both versions actually. So there's a version that they tried that's 61 minutes that they tried to get released. No one was interested. And then Jack Harris, who produced The Blob, saw it and said, "Hey, we can do something with this. I'm going to add more stuff to it, but we can do it." So he hired a guy named Jack Woods to write and direct a whole new kind of story, like a wraparound story, basically, and added like another 20 minutes to it. So that version is 82 minutes. And even more boring than the 61-minute version. Because the 61-minute version was already kind of padded because they had like 50 minutes and still needed to add more. So you have a padding of a padding. So, but it was a film that they, Dennis Muren was 18, David Allen was 20 when they made this film. So they were kids when they make this film. And just the fact that in 1970, they were able to do a film with effects of this sophistication for next to no money on 16 millimeter was astonishing. And so that was kind of how they all kind of went off and running from there. And I also watched, David Allen also produced a 19-minute short called The Magic Treasure, which he produced over the course of a decade. He seems to like to take a long time to make films, which is like a fairy tale story, which is cute, but again, significant in terms of like building his skills. And so he kept trying to make Primevals from that, and it never happened, And then finally, late 70s, like 1978-ish, he got together to make a new, kind of revise the presentation film, write a feature-length script for it, and worked on it a little bit with Phil Tippett, who of course is, for my money, the best stop motion animator of all time, and also with Ken Ralston, who also worked on Star Wars and was a major figure in Industrial Light and Magic, and then Charles Band, who we'll talk about, famously of Full Moon Entertainment, and an acolyte of Roger Corman. That's how he learned how to produce movies. Saw it and said, "Hey, let's make this." And in 1980, they were going to make it. They were going to have a huge kind of press release about it. It actually was on the cover of Cinema Fantastique magazine, which is for effects nerds. It was a big 18-page spread. The cover was the Primevals, it's coming, and they were working in full pre-production mode. And then the money fell apart and it collapsed and just never happened from there. And so again, it goes back into hibernation as he still works on it, trying to get it made. And in the meantime, he's doing effects for commercials and for other films with the production company, still getting steady work as a stop motion animator and effects artist. And then he kind of stuck with Full Moon Entertainment and Charles Band for longer than he probably should have, because honestly, David Allen was kind of too good for those guys. Because they were kind of making low budget schlock, and he was really, he'd worked on Willow, he'd worked on some big ILM stuff as a stop motion animator. But Charles Band kept saying, stick with me, we're going to make Primevals. As soon as we get enough money, we're going to make Primevals. Stick with it. And he's like, all right. And to me, the most unbelievable part of this whole story is that a low budget B movie producer kept his word, which is kind of rare. So finally, in 1994, they had enough money from Puppet Master movies squared away. Charles Band also had a deal with Paramount, so there's some money coming in from there. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And finally, they get a chance to shoot it in Romania because it was cheaper to shoot there, and also in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. So all the vistas and the scenery you see in the film, that's not CG, that's not
really
effect
nice
shots. Yeah, that's all shot second unit stuff on those locations. And so it was shot, and David Allen was going to do all the effects for it. He was going to allow himself 2 years to do it done, so it was going to be finished in 1996. So even in 1996, this film still feels kind of retro, because with Jurassic Park coming out in 93, stop motion animation is very quickly, going extinct, as Phil Tippett famously said. So unfortunately, the Full Moon deal with Paramount fell apart. That they just canceled that deal because the direct-to-video market was starting to slow up. And David Allen, unfortunately, got cancer and passed away in 1999. And since he was kind of the whole driving force behind it, it was all in his head, and he was the main effects artist, it just kind of collapsed and fell apart, and Charles Band couldn't really have the money to finish it. So it was kind of just basically put in boxes, the puppets, the 35 millimeter film and canisters, all just, set aside. And he always wanted to come back to it, Charles Band, to finish it, but, just couldn't. And then finally, we're getting to the end of the story here. In 2018, Charles Band put together an Indiegogo campaign and said, all right, we're going to finish the Primevals. Help us. We want to finish the Primevals. And so Chris Endicott, who was David Allen's assistant and was also a talented stop motion animator himself, and a lot of his friends donated their time, they donated their talent, they donated, all of their hard work to finally finish it. And in 2022, it was finally completed. His dream was finally realized, 50 years later almost. And it played in festivals in 2023, and then in 2024 it's streaming, or it's on Shudder now, and it's also on Amazon Prime Video. So it's, the fact that this movie is available to be seen at all is kind of a little miracle. So I knew all that going in, so I freely admit that my affection for this film is completely colored by that. And so Dedo, who sort of knew a little bit of that, and Ken, who was completely, ignorant of that, we have, I think, interesting perspectives on this film because we kind of cover the whole gamut of it.
Yeah. I have two questions for you,
Yeah.
Professor. One is, do you know what was shot in, and I'm assuming all the live action parts with the actors was shot in 1996, right? 1996, 94. And then were any of the special effects completed back then? Like what did they do? What was done starting in 2018?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know some of the stop motion was done by David Allen himself in the 94 to 95 area. I'm not sure when he started getting sick that precluded him from working on it, because he passed away in 99. So you figure, a few years before that, he's not necessarily able to, stand with a stop motion puppet for 16 hours
Right.
and just do a shot. But all of the principal photography, all the actors, that's all 1994. So what you're seeing is a film that's 30 years old, basically. and it looks pristine, right? I mean, they did a great job restoring it, because they found, that the film was in surprisingly decent shape, except for they lost 5% of the original negative. So 5% of it, they had to use a work print, and they had to, painstakingly kind of restore that so that it was up to the same image quality as the rest of it. But most of it was intact, which is, amazing. So a good portion of the effects were maybe done but not composited. So, and Dedo, I wanted to ask you what you thought, because it seemed to me like some of the composite may have been digital as opposed to optical. Like maybe it was a mix of optical composites and digital, because some of the composites seemed really good, like almost too good for optically composited in 1994. So I'm curious what your eye may have seen with some of that. But I think, if I were to guess, I'd say maybe at least 50% of the post or more was done, 25, 30 years later. And some of the elements existed, they just weren't put together, and finished shots.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot of it too. And then there was some stop motion too that needed to be done as well. So
what's really interesting is I just pulled up the actual campaign. It was on Indiegogo, not Kickstarter.
I said Indiegogo. Did I say Indiegogo? I think I said Indiegogo.
Oh, you might have said Indiegogo, but that's not my point. My point is they only raised 23% of their goal. Their goal was 175,000. They only paid 41, and that also is super cool that they still went ahead and finished the movie. So good.
Well,
good.
Dedo, you cheated, because that was going to be part of the budget game later. But but that's okay. But yeah, it was a flex goal, so they wanted to get 175,000, but they raised 41,000. I think it said.
Indiegogo takes, I don't remember, is it 5%? But they didn't even get that full. My money.
Plus the rewards too that they got to fulfill.
Right, and you have
to
pay taxes on that too. So
yeah,
they probably had a pretty big write-off on this movie.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so to answer your question, I would assume they probably did a digital pass over all of it. Nothing jumped out at me, but I also watched the movie on my 720p plasma, so I wouldn't necessarily see as
Mm.
much detail. Yeah, I would assume that they probably did some, probably nothing too crazy, but they probably did some, color grading and stuff, all said and done.
Yeah, I would think so. There would have to be some kind of digital intermediate to kind of equal out all of that, all the different shots, and all the different composites and everything.
What's
So I'm sure
really
that was probably the
fascinating,
case.
what's really fascinating to me is the fact that Full Moon made this movie because it's so
Yeah.
not a Full Moon movie.
Yeah, that struck me too, Dedo. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, because it's almost like they're trying to do a kids movie, but
Yeah.
there's no hallmarks of a kids movie. Like
Yeah.
you have the young sidekick, but he's old enough to be on a murder quest.
Right.
So that's not very kid friendly.
Yeah.
And the aliens are like they're mean to the animals.
Yeah.
Well, that's not, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it's like it's a weirdly sexless, romanceless movie,
Yeah.
and it's like it really stands out to me because they're like, oh, this the original that the Stone Ring movie was an Edgar Rice Burroughs
Yeah.
pastiche, and there's none of that like muscular men and sexy women. So it's
Right.
like, is it really Edgar Rice Burroughs? Like, I
Yeah.
think maybe you need to pick a different source here.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Dedo, because Band himself had that same exact thought. So he had a subsidiary of Full Moon called Moonbeam Entertainment, which was kids' movies,
Mm.
exclusively kid. And he briefly considered making this a Moonbeam movie and making it. He was going to retitle it Hybrids, is what he was going to retitle it, and release it as a kids' movie. But then he ultimately changed his mind. I guess maybe because for the reasons you just said, Dedo, maybe because some of it was a little too much for
Yeah.
really young little kids.
Yeah.
Maybe he felt I was going against what Alan wanted, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just like, yeah, I would have been hard pressed to turn this into a kids movie, but
Yeah.
it would have been nice to see a little more Edgar Rice Burroughs influence in this. It would have helped
Yeah.
overlook.
A little pulpier.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little pulpier. That's a
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
you
Yeah.
know.
And one last thing about David Allen in terms of his talent, which is you may not know his name, but everyone is familiar with his work and everyone may love his work. As I mentioned, he did a lot of commercials to kind of keep himself going. Um, he animated. Here's the characters that he stop motion animated over the years. Pillsbury Doughboy, Mrs. Butterworth, Nestle Crunchman, Swiss Miss, and Mr. Peanut. So if you were watching TV in the 70s and 80s and you saw those commercials, you were looking at David Allen's work.
Not bad. I
So,
was a fan and
yeah.
I didn't even know it.
Yeah, see that?
He's also on credited on Ghostbusters 2,
Oh.
which
Oh, interesting.
makes me think that he worked on the Statue of Liberty, or I mean maybe no, because the slime was
Slime
animated.
was already. Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless they just made him do the dancing toaster, I would imagine he did the Statue of Liberty, or at least helped on it. So yeah, so hey, got my vote
Yeah.
for
Not bad.
president. It's funny, it checks all the boxes in terms of the nostalgia. Like
Yeah.
you like and from a formula point of view, from a pacing point of view, the script works. You got this cool little prologue where we're with the Sherpa and they're just like, oh, the old one returned and he's run amok, and you're like, what is happening? I'm not even sure who I should be rooting for here. And then you have the very King Kong-esque scene where they reveal the Yeti at the university, and I fully expected the Yeti to come alive, a la King Kong, and then they put together the expedition, and then they got to go get their guide, who's of course like this older Indiana Jones, and then they meet the beautiful woman, also kind of was like a la Indiana Jones,
Right.
and then they go on their adventure. And they got the one kid who's got a grudge, like it hits all the beats. But so maybe the script is not the fault. Maybe it's just the acting.
Well, I mean, yeah, the script is like you said, it's a pastiche, but it is definitely like a super nerd
Yeah.
putting together everything he loves, right? Like there's I want a King Kong monster and I want lizard aliens and I want adventure and I want sci-fi and I want it all thrown together. And the and that's the same place that Lucas and Spielberg come to from Star Wars and Indiana Jones, right? So Lucas is like, I'm a super nerd. I love the Flash Gordon serials, and I love Kurosawa and Wizard of Oz and The Searchers, and I'm gonna throw it all on a stew. And Spielberg is like, yeah, he's like, I love those serials too, and I love old those adventure movies, the big epics, and we're gonna throw that all together. And I love supernatural sci-fi, so we're gonna put that in there. And the question is, why does Star Wars and Indiana Jones work so well and has resonated with so many people, and this one doesn't? I will admit, doesn't quite work as well as a story. Part of it is budget, certainly. This is the most expensive movie Full Moon ever made, but that's not saying a whole lot because they were not known for their huge budgets. So it's not just that. But I think what Lucas and Spielberg had was they modernized it, they updated it, right? So Raiders of the Lost Ark is not a 1930s serial. It's inspired by that, but it's a 1980s movie, right? It's written for the 80s and it's all updated. Star Wars is not Flash Gordon, and if it was Flash Gordon, it would have failed miserably, but it was updating that. And I think the intent here is to not update it, right? He wants to do a throwback, right? I want to make a movie that I loved as a kid, right? Watching Ray Harryhausen on TV, on a Saturday afternoon. I want those films. The problem is nobody watches those films anymore. Even in 1994, and he didn't really update it, I think, for modern sensibilities and modern audiences. And I think, and again, that's why I have some affection for it. I like that kind of choice. And when I mentioned at the top, it really is a film out of time. That's sort of what I'm talking about, is that like Raiders and Star Wars, are very much of their time. You don't get a movie that huge unless it's very much of its time. Mm-hmm. And this is completely out of time in every way.
Right.
And
Multiple
I think
ways.
there's and I think there's some charm to that, but I also recognize that can just completely, just you can watch it and just be like, yeah, whatever, which is, it's 50 years of this guy's life or whatever. And you're just like, yeah, whatever, let's watch something else. It just doesn't kind of resonate. I could definitely see that's the case. But I did have more fun with this than Crystal Skull. I will say.
And we're not even going to talk about the newer one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that kind of blending of, it's interesting because I thought that kind of blending of sci-fi and adventure serials that Crystal Skull tried to do, I thought this at least did that a little bit better in terms of like cleverly working in the sci-fi elements into a 30s adventure story a lot better, I thought, than Crystal Skull did.
Yeah, that's what I kind of mean. Like the pacing and the plot, like the when the twists are revealed, you're like, oh yeah, no, this all makes sense. Like the question of why the Yeti is attacking in the beginning is answered in the third act. Like, so that way it works. I would hazard to guess too, this is a case of like a visual effects guy who's not normally a director, so like it didn't occur to him to tell Juliet Mills, hey, you're coming across way too horny. Because I think we all had that reaction where we're like, she seems to want to fuck her grad student, but also might be his mother. Like, the relationship is weird.
She's also so relentlessly chipper. She's just
very
like
chipper.
all the time.
I will say though,
we all may die. Come on, everybody.
I will say though, of all the performances, I think she is the best.
Yeah, she's also Haley Mills'
like
sister, by the way.
Yeah, she's like a real actress who was in a ton of movies and TV. So
I would say she's the best, but also the worst. because she's trying so hard, she's carrying the weight of the movie. Because of that, it's distracting,
right?
And it takes you out every time she says Matthew.
She's bringing more to it, and it's maybe bringing too much.
Yeah.
I do like that. It's an older woman at the center of it. Rather than an ingenue or something, or rather than a younger person. I thought that was interesting.
No, that is very progressive. In fact, as I mentioned earlier to you guys, I was like, you totally could have just lost the Matt character.
Yeah.
You could have just made the Kathleen character the mentee, and then we just have Tough Guy.
I was also surprised there was no romance between Juliet Mills and the Indiana Jones
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it was
like I
thinking he was
thought that
setting up
was
for a
leading.
nice double date.
Yeah, double kiss at the end.
Cortai was going to get left out, but okay, wait, that's the actor's name. His real name
Yeah.
is his character's name is Siku.
Yes.
Siku,
Siku.
Siku.
But
So
time, yeah,
Siku
I
was
know
going
it's
to get
time
left out in the cold, but he's used to that.
Maybe, yeah. Also, like it was the portrayal of the Nepal natives is maybe a little 1994
Yeah. Or maybe older.
problematic or older.
It's a little Temple of Doom with the of
I
India.
mean,
Yeah,
I would say, like, is it problematic, or is it
not
just
problematic. I
the
just felt
cast?
like
Because we
it
honestly
felt.
don't see too much of their life,
That's true.
but I do feel like
What
all
we
those
got
actors were
felt to
Japanese.
me like it was somebody making up what they thought it would be
Yeah,
like, which maybe is not problematic, but is a problem.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. It's
certainly.
a little lazy for
A little
sure.
late.
Yeah. And you know, it is in keeping with those movies from the 30s. but
Yeah,
again, it's
absolutely.
1994 even,
Yeah.
so like we shouldn't be doing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
anymore.
I mean, I
You
think
know, it's
maybe
like,
the portrayal of Calcutta was a little worse than that.
yeah, that's a little cringy, right? Yeah,
A little
it's just
cringy. A
you
little
instantly
cringy.
get mugged by in
Right.
India by
But hey, the muggers were white, or at least one of them was.
one of them was, yeah, not brown face, so that's something, I
Yeah.
That
guess.
that scene killed me because I fully expected Matt to be the hero. I thought he was going to be the Indiana Jones, and I was like,
Right.
"Dude, you're worthless. Why are you on the ship?
Yeah.
He's
He is
strangling
mostly
you.
worthless.
He's
Yeah.
strangling you with a shoelace." Like,
Too
Yeah.
funny.
I guess we do have to talk about Rondo, Montana, which
yeah,
so just the name, like I have affection for a movie that has a big game hunter character named Rondo Montana. Like I feel like the game hunter in Jurassic Park could have been named Rondo Montana. I would
and
have liked.
I wish they had gone. I wish they had gone further in that direction.
Mm,
You know, I wish everyone had outlandish names.
right.
Yeah.
And everyone was a Rondo Montana type. Like, because like that would have been fun. It's almost like you were saying, like it's like he chose the wrong things to change
Yeah.
to modernize the movie, you know,
Right.
and Rondo somehow slipped in, but
Right.
yeah,
So
and
yeah,
I do,
just to fill people in. So they go to, you know, they go on their journey. So they have the opening scene, as Dedo mentioned, is there's a Yeti and he attacks Siku, the young Nepalese man, and his family. They try to capture it and kill it, but he kills one of Siku's family, so that gives him a cause for vengeance against the Yeti, and so they managed to bring the Yeti back to America. And Dr. Claire Collier, who is Juliette Mills, she presents the Yeti, saying, "Ah, here, it's the Yeti. It exists. See." And then they now have to get an expedition to go back to find a live specimen because they've noticed that there's some sort of brain surgery on this Yeti. There's some sort of like genetic tampering in some way, even, and they're not sure who's doing it. So I thought that mystery was sort of interesting about like, I didn't necessarily see that coming about like, it's not just a Yeti, it's kind of like a genetically and brain modified Yeti. And so who's responsible for that ultimately is revealed later. So that's part of the mystery is they have to go find a live specimen, not only to maybe bring back a live specimen, but also just to figure out why or who is doing this to the Yeti and who's responsible. And so to help them, they recruit a big game hunter named Rondo Montana, who we meet in Calcutta, India, in the, as you know, Ken mentioned, the cringiest way possible of instantly our two heroes getting mugged by local Calcutta denizens and Rondo stepping in to save them from the terrible brown people that they depict. And Rondo joins their expedition. I keep saying expedition, and then they're off, you know, to go find the Yeti. So
I
that's
love
kind of the middle act of it.
I love that scene where he's like, "So what are you hunting, elephant or Yeti?"
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like, how did you know? And he's like, "Well, it's the only reason
Yeah.
people come here."
Yeah. Also, Rondo does not seem quite prepared to bring back a living Yeti.
No, he did not. He didn't understand the assignment.
No.
Indeed, no.
No. Rondo has sort of a fatherly relationship in the end with both Siku and Matt, which I think
Yeah,
goes back to Jeto's suggestion that maybe they just dropped the Matt character
yeah,
because it's sort of the same relationship in the end. And it's more interesting that conflict with Siku if they had developed that more. I think it would have been more interesting. So
Interesting little side note. I'm glancing at the IMDb page. So
Yeah.
Tenzang, I assume that's Siku's brother who gets killed by the Yeti, is played by, you guys want to take a guess what this actor's real name is?
Chris Smith.
Close. Eric Steinberg. But
he seems like a
Interesting.
Steinberg.
Even
Yeah.
he
more
does.
interesting. Even more interesting, guess where Eric Steinberg was born?
Nepal.
More relevant to us.
Where?
DC.
Oh, really? No
Oh.
kidding.
He's a DC native.
That's
He's
interesting.
been on Star Trek and Stargate SG-1.
Wow.
So they've come all the way out to Romania.
All right.
Shoot that stuff.
And based on the trailers that I'm getting for his page, it looks like he's maybe also part of doing video games.
Oh, okay.
Or
He's still
video-
working.
That's
Yeah,
just a
good for
guess
him.
on my part. They
Yeah.
showing video game trailers. That could be. Yeah, he is working.
Okay. While we're on the subject of Nepal, so yeah, what we talked about Nepalese actor. Well, we talked about Nepal. I just want to talk about this, so I don't care if my transition is awkward or segue is terrible. So there's a lot, and again, I mentioned all the research I did. I went down a rabbit hole for this one because there's a random line where Rondo, when they first meet Rondo, and he finally decides to, all right, I'm going to help you. We're going to go on this expedition. We're going to get this Yeti. And he says, everybody set your watches 10 minutes ahead because the Nepalese like to get a jump on the world when they're 10 minutes ahead. And I'm like, is that true? So I looked it up. It's kind of true. So, okay, so bear with me. So Nepali Standard Time only dates back to 1956. So that's when they kind of started they have their own kind of time zone, which is kind of interesting, which I didn't know. It's not a very big country, but they have their own time zone. And it seems to exist in its own time zone. So, which is different from the international clock everywhere else. And so in 1956, they decided that the meridian for determining the correct time in Nepal was Gari Sakar, which is just basically a mountain peak right in the middle of the country. So that's where you determine what time it is in Nepal. Now, India at the time declared its meridian through Calcutta, which put Nepal at the time 10 minutes ahead of India, which they had took a great pride in because they did not like India. And they said, we're 10 minutes ahead of India. And so later, India moved its meridian to Hyderabad, which then made it another 5 minutes behind. So it technically is 15 minutes ahead of the rest of the world in that area. So that is actually kind of true.
Wow.
Which I thought was super interesting. So David Allen did his research on Nepali Standard Time to come
That's
up with
funny.
that line.
I did write that down.
Did you?
I'm like, I need to ask about that.
Yeah, so there you go.
Okay, so
Thank you.
So speaking of lines that made me wonder, I don't think you have an answer for this, but there's a scene when they first get to the Lost World, and the professor starts drawing. Somebody is like, "Why not use a camera?" And she's like, "Because anyone can take a picture."
That's right.
Oh, are we on a like self-actualization trip now?
Yeah. Seems kind of important. You'd want to take pictures.
Yeah. Meanwhile, she has no problem recording herself talking.
Right. And I was like, other they just wanted to show the really cool sketches they'd done, so they were like, let's work this into the movie. And they were
Yeah.
cool sketches, but like I was just like, that's an odd thing to have in 94. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
people were no strangers to cameras.
That's
then.
the other thing. That's the other thing too, which is a similar dynamic to Jurassic Park, which is that these professors and PhD people have studied the Yeti their whole kind of academic careers, and now you said they finally see it in front of them at long last. It's not academic, it's not theoretical, and there's nothing. Maybe
Right.
part of it is the actor,
Yeah.
but
You get like
Part
a
of it's not
hint
in
of
there.
that at the beginning when
in the museum.
Yeah, and Matthew is standing in front of after the ceremony, after the presentation. He's standing by himself in front of the Yeti, the stuffed Yeti, and like it doesn't have a look of wonder, but sort of like a wistful. This is what I always wanted. So you
To
get a
me,
hint of it.
he also looked like he was like, fuck, I wrote that paper when I was stoned. You know, like,
I was right.
yeah, he was just like he was, you know, like, oh. I did like that scene though. I'm always a sucker for academia stuff because I'm always
Yeah.
like, is there any part of real academia that's like that? I love this fictional academia where university can like mount expeditions and like.
I know.
Can you imagine AU's film school mount? Like, I got sent to Prague and that was like
Yeah.
almost a disaster.
No, but we get that she says who's funding this expedition. It's academic publishing company.
Right.
That's funding this. It's like,
Right.
how do they have Yeti
Even
expedition
in
money?
1994, I don't think they had Yeti
which
expedition
is
money.
actually like, but that is like that's another throwback. Like that's
Right.
how explorers made money in the 20s and
Yeah.
The National
yeah.
Geographic
So,
era, you know, kind
yeah.
of.
So
Yep.
it's like again, it's like no. What would the modern version be? It would be at least a TV show. Like it wouldn't be
Right.
the Random House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it would be like Bill Gates or something. It would be like, you know,
Right.
the
Yeah.
tech billionaire
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yep.
Like the like Rainn Wilson and the Meg, right?
Right.
It's like funding that ridiculous research vessel and they don't know where to find the Meg. So that's what it would be, probably. But yeah, that's another kind of throwback of it, that kind of academia view. Is there anything else we want to talk about in terms of the effect or the story of it? Like eventually, I don't know if we want to get into spoilers essentially or tell people, oh, we're going to go into spoilers. So if you jump ahead, if you want to spoilers.
Spoiler here.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's in the synopsis, and that synopsis actually of who is actually behind this, which is those kind of reptilian sort of aliens.
And
are
they're on the
ones who
cover.
have-
You're like,
Yeah.
So they're the ones who are behind the kind of genetic modification of the Yeti and splice and bioengineering and everything. And they
that
also,
I gotta say that is cool detail. That's probably my favorite part of the script.
I thought that was clever in terms
well,
of.
no, sorry, not specifically the aliens, but the fact that the ostensibly they may or not have been good aliens, but like the sophisticated aliens died and the servant aliens regressed. I mean, that's like the whole point of the title, right? Like servant aliens regressed into this animalistic level, but they still had some technology, so they're the ones torturing the Yeti to have gladiator games.
Yeah. That was that was a really good plot.
Yeah, it's complicated, but it's like it is I think better than just simply like evil aliens showed up and they're just like using things for their entertainment.
Yeah. You can also see kind of David Allen mixing his King Kong, you know, fandom with the sci-fi part of it. He's like, I want lizard aliens fighting King Kong.
Right.
That's going to be awesome.
Right.
And it's like, that's pretty cool.
I find it interesting. I would love to know why he chose to make the aliens stop motion, but he had people in the hominid suits. Because I think that actually was like the biggest disconnect in terms of the special effects.
Yeah.
Because it was like you have all these fantastical creatures and they're all stop motion, so it's like it's all there in one part of your brain, but then you have people in monkey costumes and you're like, wait, that's those guys should also be stop motion, or the aliens should also be people in costumes? Because like that created a huge disconnect. And I understand why they didn't do the monkeys as stop motion, because that's more expensive.
Yeah.
But it's like, think about all the money you could have saved if you had just made a good lizard costume.
Had like Land of the Lost
because the lizards
kind of thing.
Lizards weren't so amazingly like different looking.
Yeah.
You know, like they were thin, but they weren't so thin that you were like, that couldn't possibly be a human.
Right.
You know, so it just love to know like why there was any reason for that, or if he was just like, I wanted to do lizards. Like, yeah.
It was probably budget, I assume. I would think so, but it is an interesting question. But I thought the compositing on the lizard people, like when they're walking with the humans, I thought that was really well done for stop motion in 1994. Like that was Again, maybe there may have been some digital compositing or digital cleaning up of that, but it looked pretty good. They looked like they were together in the same space.
I mean, honestly, the hardest part about stop motion, to my limited knowledge of stop motion, is camera angle, is matching camera. Because you're dealing with little guys, you got to recreate the same camera angle as if you're filming full-size people.
Right.
No, there's no digital fixing of that.
Right.
Right,
If you get the wrong camera angle, you're
Yeah,
kind of screwed.
indeed.
There's now good tools to help figure out what the camera angle is, but if both the live action and the stop motion footage was shot back then, yeah, yeah, you're screwed if you got that wrong. So that I would assume that's mostly their work, their quality work. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean the craftsmanship of the whatever you feel of the movie, the craftsmanship of the stop motion animation is pretty high, and it makes sense because like it's 1994, so it's like stop motion in many ways has kind of reached the limit of its innovation, and it's kind of the peak of where it's going to go in terms of talent and in terms of how it's going to look. Like it's not going to look much better than that essentially. The really only kind of major innovation in stop motion, prior to that was probably Phil Tippett's invention of Go Motion, which the first time he did for Dragon Slayer, which was the thing about stop motion that is always gives it away and makes it look a little janky sometimes is that every frame is in perfect focus. So there's no motion blur. So you get that kind of strobing effect when characters are in movement. And that's kind of the charm of it. It looks a little off and looks a little weird, but it always bothered Tippett. So he invented something called Go Motion, which was he invented like a little motion system where when he would click the shutter to take the picture of the one frame, it would move the puppet just a little bit and would introduce motion blur. And so now when you play it back, you get a little motion blur and it looks much more realistic and doesn't look as much like stop motion. Like in Dragon Slayer, it looks incredible. So that was kind of maybe one of the last kind of major innovations in stop motion. And that's why, come 1993 and 92, when Spielberg is doing Jurassic Park, and Phil Tippett was prepared to do all the dinosaurs stop motion and is using his Go Motion technique. And on the DVDs and Blu-rays, you can look and see the test footage that he did. It looks pretty good. Like it looks as good as stop motion is going to look. But Spielberg was still like, I can still see the seams. It doesn't quite blow you away. It doesn't have the wonder that I want. And then Dennis Muren showed him the first Gallimimus test, and the rest is, cinematic history essentially.
I've always been curious about, and I have no idea if people played around with this or not, but with frame interpolation with stop motion, where you, especially now with AI, but even before that, like digital slow mo doing frame interpolation, where it looks at the frame before and the frame after, and it creates new frames,
yeah,
to slow things down. And certainly not perfect, but I always wondered that, like, wouldn't that add a more lifelike effect to stop motion? Maybe.
Yeah,
I certainly haven't tried because I don't have the patience. But
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like stop motion is kind of having a bit of a resurgence, lately in terms of low budget films and everything. And I don't think stop motion is ever going to go away because there's too much. It's too interesting and people love it too much. But it's the people who know how to do it are kind of few and far between. But I think it's interesting that like stop motion essentially kind of died out before digital cameras came about. And so like what how digital cameras and digital photography would affect stop motion.
But also what's really interesting is now when you watch some behind the scenes videos, now they have all the rigging on the stop motion because you could so much easier get rid of that stuff now digitally.
Yeah.
So even though that the actual stop motion technology of frame is the same, but now you have almost marionette like movement on these, so you can do a much quicker posing.
Yeah. You also have 3D printing, innovation in 3D printing as well for the puppets. And so lip sync is a lot better now because you can just print out each of those heads, just replace the heads and just have like Leica Entertainment, who does some really great stop motion like Paranorman and Box Trolls and Kubo and the Two Strings. That kind of stuff, that stop motion is incredible. And that's a mix of like traditional stop motion and adding in digital effects too. But they make extensive use of, and Aardman does too, the Wallace and Gromit guys, they make extensive use of 3D printing.
Did you guys see the movie 9? It came out in like 2004.
Yes. It was a short film, an Oscar nominated short film, and then became a feature.
Yeah.
That one, again, cool visuals, disappointing story.
Definitely.
But what was really funny was, I was fired up for that movie just for the trailer, because the trailer had this awesome song by Coheed and Cambria, who I was not familiar with at the time. So I was excited about that too. And then I go to realize that they actually cut up the song and flipped flipped two sections of the song to fit the trailer better. So I was like,
Whoa.
God damn it, Hollywood. Nothing about this is right. It's a good song, but honestly, the trailer version is better.
Well, that movie reminded me of Brothers Quay a lot. I don't know if you've seen any of their
Yeah.
stuff. They're most famous for their videos for Tool from the
Yeah.
90s.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. It was
so creepy.
Yeah.
It's
Just
really
like that.
creepy.
Extremely like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I also saw recently, I'm pretty sure it's actually like Hasbro themselves have been doing little stop motion scenes using Transformer toys.
Oh,
They're actually like
That's
taking
cool.
like they're taking the audio from like old Transformer episodes. So like I saw one where they introduced the Dinobots, and it's pretty well done. I mean, it's still like it's still obviously on somebody's table, but they've got
Right.
they've got some very cartoonish effects. Like one of the Dinobots breathes fire, and it's a cartoon fire. Pretty neat. I got to see if I can track down more of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Very
we
cool.
might see, because like that's the other thing nowadays. You both 3D modeling, but you also have these toys that are just insanely detailed and realistic looking, and it's like it's almost a shame not to do something with them.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like ripe for this.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you also have the technology like the Gaussian splat and the 3D modeling, where it makes it like super easy to scan any of that stuff and just make a digital
Right.
and
True.
do it that way. So like I do think just to be a pessimist, it's like I think you do kind of quickly lose the justification for stop motion when you can
Right.
actually do it digitally and do it and just have so much more control over everything. But that being said, there's like, as of right now anyways, there's still very much a tangibleness to it that you don't get digitally.
Yeah.
Like there's
And-
that moment in the movie where the Yeti I think he kills Penzang. Could be wrong about that, but he just smushes someone.
yeah, steps on him.
Yeah.
And it's not gory because the guy's wearing like big furs and like there's no blood, but you just and you're like, oh, that's all.
Yeah. It's also one of the things that like I get the feeling that like that image was burned into David Allen's brain as a kid. You know, just seeing like stop motion monsters smushing things, and he just want that image in my movie. I want him just coming, big foot coming down and smashing something.
Yeah. Well, I was when you mentioned that other movie, and now I've forgotten what it was called, but I pulled it up on IMDb. The one he made when he was younger.
Oh, Equinox.
Equinox, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely had not seen it. But yeah, there's in the trailer, the trailer looks amazing. There's a creature just going ape shit and just beating the crap out of some dude, just picking him up and just like.
There's about 100, and I'm a nerd because I counted this. There's almost exactly 100 effect shots in Equinox, which is kind of a lot for 18-year-old kids in 1967 doing a movie.
Well, drugs were better back then.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true. And most of them, most of those effect shots were that sequence of that big kind of monster thing.
But they had a great shot of a human playing a giant, and they just did their
they did some forced perspective with I
was wondering, was it? Do you think it was forced perspective, or was it just literally split screen compositing?
So it's both. Yeah, there's some forced perspective in there, and there's some split screens.
That looked just as good as anything in Lord of the Rings. So
yeah, oh yeah. And Dennis Muren actually invented a 16 millimeter optical printer that they used himself, which is kind of amazing. It wasn't very sophisticated, but it did the job. So it was that was it's worth seeing. But again, it's something you have to note its significance in your mind, because as a movie it's just not entertaining very much. Those sequences are great and really cool, but there's a lot of padding and a lot of boring shit.
It's kind of like you watch Citizen Kane and you're like, I'm sorry, why am I impressed by this? And you're like, oh, he was the first one to do it.
Right, exactly.
Oh,
this.
Yeah.
Right.
So there you go. There you have it. David Allen, Citizen Kane of stop motion.
There you go. Exactly. Well, now we don't know elaborate preamble. We can get to the real feature, which is the budget game, which Dedo cheated just a little bit because I was going to talk about not the Kickstarter, but the Indiegogo campaign. But I don't have a specific budget number, but I have a close enough budget number for how much this cost. And this is all in. This includes the Kickstarter, or I keep saying Kickstarter, the Indiegogo, and the original shoot in 1994, plus the principal photography and all the effects and everything, all together. And I will say, we mentioned they did go to Romania and shoot it. They did go to Italy and shoot in the Dolomites. They shot on studios, all that effects. It is the most expensive film that Full Moon ever made, still to this day. So there's that. So Ken, we'll start with you. Do you want to guess as to how much the Primevals cost?
So bad at this.
That's why it's fun. If you're good at it, it
Yeah,
wouldn't be
I
any
know.
fun.
I know. I'm gonna say 200 grand.
Okay, 200 grand. Dedo?
All right, so I'm pretty sure the word millions was bantered about at some
Oh,
point.
was it? Okay.
But
Say,
but also,
Do you want to
about
revise
this.
you want to revise your guess, Ken?
$1 million.
Since Dedo cheated a little bit, so $1 million. Okay,
oh,
Ken.
you motherfucker, you said that.
Oh, did I? Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
All right,
Ken
so
says 1 million.
Ken says 1 million. I heard millions, but also
Okay.
it's because it's full moon.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that could only possibly mean two. So I'm gonna say $2,030,000 from the Kickstarter.
Right, yeah, 2,040,000, right?
No, because Indiegogo takes percentage.
Oh, okay. There you go.
2 million.
30
Plus the
30
rewards,
million,
so maybe
38.
we were less. Yeah. The total was actually, you're not close, was over $4 million. The whole thing all in. And Charles Band has freely admitted he's never going to get his money back. He was just doing it for the love of the film and to pay respects to a close collaborator and friend in David Allen. So it was kind of a charity case for the most part.
I assume most of that money was spent in the 90s, so
Yeah, right.
it's not like he set fire to $4 million just to get this thing released. It's
True.
like,
Yeah.
But even in the mid 90s, was he really going to make $4 million back from this movie?
I mean,
Maybe
94 was peak DVD.
Yeah. He certainly had a
Right,
better
like-
chance in the 90s, I think, than he would now.
Yeah. for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, DVD wasn't
Considering
really
the
until
state of the
90,
industry.
96, 97 is when DVD got big.
Okay.
90 was too early for DVD in 94.
Peak
Yeah.
VHS. Peak VHS.
Yeah.
Big VHS, yeah. So maybe
That's why we call him the professor.
that's right. And also worked in a video store in grad school, so I know exactly when the DVD got big. So it's a lot. But I think you can see most of that money on screen, I think, right? Because the vistas and it looks great. It's shot in 94, but it still looks pretty pristine, for the most part, aside from, some of the shots that they had because they lost about 5% of the original negative over the years and had to go to a work print to, get back to that and again, bring up the quality of it. So I think it still looks pretty good. So I don't know if I would have guessed as much as 4 million, but I certainly would have guessed a couple million because it does look like.
I have no grasp on what people were spending on movies like that back then. So it's harder to gauge. If you told me this movie was made in 2010, I'd have a much easier time figuring out how much it cost.
Right.
But like 94, hell, it was shot on film.
Shot on 35 millimeter. Yeah.
Yeah. So
exactly.
That's a big chunk of the money right there.
And not only that, but like, going through it doesn't, not only the film cost of shooting it, but also like the pain in the ass post-production that comes with effects and 35 millimeter film, that kind of, because it's still, it's too early for digital composites, digital intermediates, I should say, in 94, when they finished it off, I'm sure they did digital intermediate, but in 94, that wasn't an option. So you're talking about finishing it photochemically and it's going to be a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah. That's
expensive. But we also have to move to my favorite game, everybody's favorite game, which is the Walk-In Award. Dedo, do you want to explain what the Walk-In Award is?
The Walk-In Award is when we pick out our favorite lines and say whether or not they'd be better if Christopher Walken said them.
Yeah. And the lines can be either an ordinary line that an actor puts a great spin on, or it can be, interesting or bizarre line as written. And it doesn't really matter how you deliver it. It's just weird. So, Dedo, so do you want to start? Do you have any Walk-In Award lines that come to mind?
I would just like to swap out the Professor Juliet with Christopher Walken.
That would be pretty great.
every time she says Matthew, it would instead
Yeah.
Matthew. But also of course the Rondo
Mondo Kane.
Rondo Montana line. So, are you here to hunt elephants or the Yeti? Actually, he also could be. Actually, everyone could be replaced by Chris.
That could be.
That's true. That's true. And Juliet just randomly shouting "Matt" is going to be my new ringtone, I think.
Yeah.
That'll be great. Ken, do you have any candidates for the walk of the line?
I do. It's also a Rondo line.
I think I know what you're going to say, Ken.
Yeah, I bet you
But
do.
go ahead. Because it is the best line in the movie, and it is
the eyes
classic
of
line.
a dying giraffe can change a man.
That's it.
Okay, yeah, that is absolutely. I withdraw my submission.
Can you
but-
do
The eyes of a-
Can you do it as
Yeah, please,
walk-in,
Dedo. Yes.
The eyes of a dying giraffe can change a man.
That was pretty perfect. Yeah. That is an all timer. The eyes of a dying giraffe can change a man. That would have been mine.
Honestly, that should be the title of the movie.
Should
Yes.
be. Should be.
That's actually pretty good. That should be a title for something.
Yeah, right.
That'll be David Allen's memoir or something.
Yeah.
If he had any notes for a memoir.
Or Radiohead, new fucking album.
Yeah. There was a Claire line, Juliet line that I kind of liked, where she says in her chipper manner, she's always chipper. She says, "We're going to climb Everest, Matthew. We're not going to climb Everest, Matthew. We're searching for a Yeti." As if that's easier than climbing Everest.
That was the other line I had written down.
Yeah.
There's also one. This isn't it's an odd moment, but when Rondo saves Claire and Matt from the muggers in Calcutta, he rips off. So he knocks out one of the guys, and then he rips his shirt off with a knife. He's like, "Now you'll have 2 headaches tomorrow."
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what that means.
Also, if we're talking about how weird that scene is, the fact that Rondo first enters by doing what appears to be a flying shoulder massage, like he literally leaps in as if he's like just standing on an apple box off camera, grabs the guy by the shoulders in this kind of like smack squeeze, which causes that guy to like let go of Juliet, and then he tosses him. Like was this the B unit? That was the best you guys could come up with here? Like that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
again,
indeed.
and that's what made it feel like at times it felt like it was for kids, because it was like this almost like not violent violence.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, this is what you do to your brother when he's sitting at the dinner table. Just
Yeah.
crack him on his shoulders.
And then the last one that I'll point out, which is just kind of random, which is when things are going to hell at the end, and there's like all hell's breaking loose, and I think is it Siku? I think no, it's Matt. Matt says this, where they're trying to get to higher ground and trying to protect themselves and everything, and he just shouts, "Get the women to higher ground!" Like, okay, is that
it's like
a thing?
There's the Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. That's definitely that kind of macho. I'm gonna
Save
take
the women.
over. Yeah,
Save the women folk.
I'm gonna take over and be the manly man and get the women to higher ground.
I'm gonna write a stern letter to these aliens.
Yeah.
Fucking worthless. That's all time.
So, all right. So good walking game. Excellent. Good walking awards.
Yeah.
Is there any other final thoughts or closing thoughts that Dedo or Ken, you guys have about this film?
I would just like to throw a plug in for the movie poster. I don't know when it was created, if it was for this new release, but I think it's great. It's very retro looking, drawn movie poster that looks like a throwback to, a 70s or 60s film. I like it.
Yeah, it makes for a good thumbnail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our boy David Allen did not work on the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stop motion.
No, that's Rankin Bass. That's
because there are some distinct Yeti similarities.
Yes.
Yeah, like the eyes.
They're very
Indeed. I think that brings us to the end of Primevals. And before we go, we may have a little controversy here for the first time, I think, in a while, which is this is the no really trust us. We really, find these gems and we all want you to watch it. But I wholeheartedly recommend this movie. I think it's a lot of fun. Again, I think you have to go into it with a certain mindset. If you're going to think about it as just another kind of movie from today, you may just be disappointed and it's been kind of weird. But if you know the spirit it's intended and the style it's going after, I think you can be charmed by it, like I was essentially. But Dedo, I think you have a different view, essentially, don't you?
I mean,
Or maybe you don't. Maybe I've convinced you.
well, you have swayed me a bit. I will say, yeah. If you are a person who love the old school serial type movies and the old Harryhausen movies and you love films in general, then I think Primevals has something for you. But I would love to hear from our viewing audience, the millions and millions of No Really Trust followers, but specifically from anyone who's younger than 40, whether or not they get any nostalgia out of this movie at all. So I do wonder if maybe it is a very like specific type of person that needs to watch this movie, because I do think that objectively, if you take away the backstory and you just watch it as a film, it's sadly not a great movie. Pretty derivative, as we talked about. The effects are pretty dated, but like Professor said, when you think about how it got made, when you think that how unlikely it is that it exists at all, it's worth celebrating, and it's also just worth rewarding Full Moon for doing this, because they used to make some really fun, great movies. Lately, they're not really doing that, so it's kind of awesome to see them actually bother to do this. So bravo, Full Moon. Go ahead and rent Primevals, people.
Yeah, and speaking of nostalgia, it was kind of cool to see the Full Moon logo again, because I haven't really been watching Full Moon movies lately, as Dedo mentioned, because they haven't been the greatest. But growing up, in the video store VHS era, seeing those Full Moon Entertainment VHS covers, like Puppet Master and Ghoulies, everywhere. And seeing that logo did bring back some nostalgia of, oh, I remember that logo. That's pretty cool. Ken, what is your ultimate verdict on the Primevals?
Yeah, I would say, as with a lot of these movies that we cover, it's not for everyone. And I think that I would say absolutely do all your research, read about the background of the movie before you watch it, and that's going to like raise your level of enjoyment for the movie, I would say. Because I agree with Dedo. Like, there's got a lot of problems, but it's definitely worth supporting because of the time and the care that went into it, and I think that's worth celebrating.
Agreed. Excellent. So actually, you guys are closer than I thought. I thought you guys were just going to be like, "Oh, this is crap. Don't watch it." But yeah, I recommend it. I think as Dedo and Ken mentioned, if you kind of go into it with the proper spirit and the proper mindset, I think you'll have a great time with it. But that's the Primevals, and that's this episode of No Really Trust Us. So certainly trust me on this. I think you'll have fun with it, if not us. But that's all for this time of No Really Trust Us. Tune in next time when we'll have another hidden gem for you to enjoy. Bye-bye.
Bye, kids.
Thanks for listening. If you've got a movie that you love and you think more people should know about, drop us a line at noreallytrustus@gmail.com or on Instagram @noreallytrustus. Don't forget to rate and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.